Hello everyone. The title of my presentation is Role of Women in Conflict Resolution, Mitigating Negative Impacts of Mining in Mongolia through International Lending Institutions. Conflicts between local communities and multinational mining corporations have increased with influx of foreign investment. Between 2021 and 2023, nearly 90% of violence and protests happened in emerging economies, while up to 81% of mining was by companies from wealthier and major consumer countries. In Mongolia, local herding communities in the South Gobi region are struggling to protect their land, water, and livelihood due to weak regulations and lack of compliance by the mining companies. This study examines the case of Oyuntuya, a world-class copper-gold mine discovered by Canadian-based company Ivanhoe Mines and managed by Rio Tinto. Rio Tinto is a large-scale multinational mining corporation that signed an investment agreement with the government of Mongolia. This agreement obliged the company to comply with international financial institutions' lending standards. It was expected that this agreement for the mine, named Oyuntuya, would set up a model for all the other large-scale mines in Mongolia in bringing economic prosperity to the nation. Instead, Rio Tinto prioritized profit-making. It did not obtain free, prior, and informed consent from impacted herding communities. Herders' concerns over diminishing water resources, desertification, and shrinking pasture land were ignored. Protests against mining and corruption escalated as anti-mining movements used weapons assembling outside the Parliament House. Women mobilized as well. Sukh set up her NGO called Oyuntuya Watch with a goal to demand corporate accountability and compliance with human rights and environmental standards. This was an especially courageous act given that the democratic space in Mongolia is declining and facing threat of authoritarianism. Feminist scholars argue that women across cultures and histories have been socialized to be apolitical. Men are often portrayed as leaders in social movements. Compared to Nelson Mandela and Martin Luther King Jr., women like Frances Bard and Ella Baker remain invisible despite their massive contributions. Kumba calls this phenomenon the male bias in social movements. To understand the power inequalities, feminist scholars analyze the intersection of class, race, and gender by examining the meaning and nature of oppression. Women's subjectivity is also influenced by the history and culture of their societies. Hence, women's resistance against mining can be seen as challenging the emblem of male power and the capitalist and patriarchal social order. To perform the case study analysis, I use the concept of message framing. Frames are understood as collective patterns of meaning which create a consistent framework for the purpose of explaining facts, substantiating criticisms, and legitimating claims. The research question is, why and how did the women mobilize against large-scale mining in Mongolia? In 2012 and 13, together with local herders whom she trained, Sukh and her Oyuntuya Watch NGO filed 2 complaints regarding herders' displacement, resettlement, and the impacts of the Onday River diversion by the mine using the International Finance Corporation's Compliance Advisor Ombudsman mechanism. The IFC is a powerful actor because its recognition of mining-impacted communities as indigenous peoples gives the communities an entitlement to free, prior, and informed consent with regard to any extractive project under the international law. After years of struggle, the IFC eventually recognized Mongolian herders' claim as indigenous people, which gave them the power to negotiate with Rio Tinto and demand compensation, resettlement, and other community development support. Negotiations resulted in an agreement for an annual investment of $5 million by Rio Tinto for local development projects in South Gobi. 114 claims received compensation close to $1 million. 60 action items were implemented protecting pasture land and water. The case became an international model for dispute resolution. In this way, women established their role as a bridge between rural communities and international organizations. Their experience of accessing transnational justice systems forms new political identities and spaces for women's activisms in Mongolia. They changed the traditional image of an obedient Mongolian woman into an active political actor. Women helped to significantly reduce the Oyuntuya mine's negative impact for herding communities, creating new economic opportunities and mitigating poverty and migration. The herders secured their supply of water and access to pasture land. So Kirill's strategy of message framing was to claim Hurdu's rights as indigenous people. This work was informed by her community-led research with nomadic herding communities. The strategy was successful. It united the urban women's NGOs with rural movements. It was powerful in gaining broad public support in Mongolia. In conclusion, women's strategies of resistance were distinct from men's, as they were nonviolent, limited, but strategic and effective. Overall, urban women's high level of education, knowledge of foreign languages, and awareness of the local impacts of economic globalization helped them to extend their struggle beyond national boundaries. Hence, women successfully defended human rights and how the mining company interacts with the local communities. In the process, women transformed the patriarchal image of Mongolian women domestically and internationally. More women have entered the parliament and continue advocating internationally for the rights of rural communities. It is crucial that women's political empowerment is advanced by international development actors. For example, Alinea's Women, Peace and Security work aligns with the landmark United Nations Security Council Resolution 1325 and supports governments to develop national action plans on WPS. In Sri Lanka, our Pathways to Peace project supports government bodies to deliver inclusive and equitable public services, while also strengthening civil society organizations, including women's rights organizations, to hold governments accountable. Alinea's Protect 2 project supported the Ukrainian defense sector to implement the country's National Action Plan on WPS. Key results included strengthening the Gender Advisors Network within the armed forces, promoting women's representation and leadership in the defense sector, and working with the Ministry of Defense to develop an equal rights strategy embedding gender approaches at the strategic level. Protect 2 contributed to transforming the Ukrainian national forces into a more gender-sensitive institution. This presentation shows the ways in which civil society organizations and international development actors contribute to women's political empowerment and the implementation of UN Security Council resolutions on WPS, particularly 2242 of 2015.